let's get started. Um, I'm sorry, but since I'm not muted, my phone rings. You'll hear it. But Senator Feingold, who I enjoyed working so much with. So Senator Feingold is the Senate Chair of the Election Commission, and I think at the beginning of the session, he had been in the Senate and then made a short exit and then came back, so he was sort of a new senator. And when he got elections to chair, I bet he thought that he wouldn't have much to do. It's going to be quiet, no heavy lifting, and all he's had is heavy lifting. So Barry was the brainchild behind the Senate bill, and it was great working on the conference committee with him. And he has in-laws that live in Newton, so that even makes a closer connection. So Barry, Andover, long ride. See, there's something good about remote. So Barry, if you want to talk to us a little bit and tell us about how you felt the bill turned out.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank Senator Creem for having me, and she's very modest, but she was instrumental. She was part of our conference committee, and as much as we're all Democrats in the House and the Senate, it can be very contentious when we go into conference committees. And this is one of the few conference committees that we actually got done, and Senator Creem played a huge role in that. And someone who's been an amazing colleague, amazing leader in the state Senate, and someone that I'm proud to say is a friend. So when she asked to do that, it was a no-brainer. But I can tell you, if it wasn't for Senator Creem, this bill wouldn't have happened. So I also have a great co-chair, and John Lawn. He may be joining us. I don't know if he's on yet.
Yes, he was coming, Barry, but he had another commitment. Okay. So somebody isn't muted and we're hearing little sound, so make sure you're all muted. Go ahead, Barry, sorry.
So, and I see a lot of friends here. I see Mike Zimmer, who's one of my old constituents. I see Barry White, who at some point is going to actually shave. And many of you, as what Cindy was saying, my in-laws are Mark and Janet Gottesman. My wife grew up in Newton, went to Newton South. So I thank you all for a wonderful person that you helped raise in your community. So, but it's really just a pleasure to be here. What I really want to do is kind of talk about, the genesis of the bill, where the bill's at now as far as, obviously it's a law, and how we're thinking about it for the future. And then what would be really helpful to get some of your input on what you like about what we've done, and maybe somewhere, things that we could improve. So to what Senator Creem was saying, it was a sleepy year on the election law committee around March 1st. We were dealing with some big issues like, ranked choice voting and other things like that, but no one ever thought that we'd have to be thinking about how to deal with elections during a pandemic. And obviously, when things really went crazy in March, there was a real consideration of how are people going to vote. And, as a state that we've had absentee ballots, but we really never had a really expansive vote by mail program. And, we debated about what we should do. We debated about whether we should just mail everyone a ballot. We debated about, should we do anything at all? And when we thought about whether we should send everyone a ballot, the main problem that we had was, what do you do in a state like Massachusetts, where you have an open primary, where those who are unenrolled can either choose a Democratic ballot or choose a Republican ballot. And there are many people who choose to vote in primary that one year they'll choose a Democratic ballot, and another year they'll choose a Republican ballot. So there was not an easy fix. So what we came to the conclusion that we needed to send everyone an application to take an affirmative step to ask for an absentee ballot. Now, we had a lot of critics that said there was no way that the unenrolled voters will even bother. It's a waste of money. It's not going to be useful, and you're just throwing money away. But to our surprise, we had a massive participation from unenrolled voters. And, normal elections, you know, it would range in a primary from anywhere from 500,000 people to 1 million people that would come out and vote. And only once in 1990 did we hit 1.5 million voters in a primary. But this last September 1st, we hit 1.6 million voters, the largest turnout ever in a primary in Massachusetts. So in my opinion, clearly it worked. And as many of you know, we were committed to having 3 different ways that people could vote. As I mentioned before, you could do the vote by mail. For the first time in a primary, we allowed people to vote early. And for the traditionalists, we allowed people to vote on the day of the election. Now, one of the things that we fell a little short on is there were ballots that were not counted because they got there after. What we've already done for the general election is that if it's postmarked by Tuesday, November 3rd, and it arrives to the town clerk or city clerk by Friday, November 6th, it will count. So I think some of the problems that we had where we had probably almost 8,000 votes that would have been counted if this was a general election, they will be counted this time. The other 8,000, because we had about 17,000 votes that were not counted. The other 8,000 were just voter error of not signing things properly. And I will admit that we do need to do a better education next time around about how to properly fill out the ballots and education along with that. Another challenge that we have is that the lower socioeconomic communities like Lawrence, which I represent, did not participate in vote by mail as much as the higher socioeconomic communities. And I think that is once again about education. And we are going to hopefully do a better job educating people these next couple weeks. But in the future, if we stick to vote by mail, we're going to have to do a much better job of educating people in Fall River, Lawrence, Lowell, in cities like that. But overall, I would say that it has been a success. It is something that I think we can build on and understand that this is not a permanent thing. When we pass this bill, it's only for this year. So what I'm really looking for, and I think that's why this is so helpful, that Senator Creem, basically allowed, me to come here tonight, was to really get your feedback about what you like, what you don't like, and maybe some of your concerns about the bill, because understand it is a law now, but come January 1st, 2021, there will not be vote by mail in Massachusetts. Now, there'll be the traditional absentee ballot route. You can still vote early in general elections, but right now we are not definitely going to have voting early in a primary, and we will not have a system like we have right now. So I don't know if any of the clerks are joining us, if they want to add as well. But I would like to try to open it up for some questions and your comments. And, as you ask questions, I'll also probably give you some more commentary. But that is really the 10,000-foot view of what we did with the bill, why it worked. And it was an incredibly difficult negotiation because not only did we have to convince our members in the Senate, which is always challenging, not only do we have to convince all the members in the House, which is incredibly challenging, but we also had to deal with the Secretary of State, who, is very opinionated, has his own thoughts on things. Then we had to deal with the Republican Party, both in the House and the Senate. And the one thing that I was really committed to is I didn't want this to be a partisan bill. And in the end, it was a unanimous vote. Thanks to people like Senator Creem that did work with Republicans, that talked to people like Minority Leader Tarr. And so we couldn't have it that people were saying, well, this is just a partisan Democratic thing. And then after that, we had to convince the governor, Charlie Baker, not to veto it. And to his credit, he signed it without any amendments or without any vetoes. So this was a five-way negotiation in a very short amount of time, because we really started to understand the virus in April, and we got the bill done in June. And no disrespect to any of us in the legislature, but usually it takes more than 60 days to get anything done. And frankly, we got this done in 60 days, which for major legislation is almost next to impossible. So it was an example of bipartisanship. It was an example of teamwork. It was an example of people coming together to get this done. And I think the one thing that our president can't say is that voting by mail does not work, because it clearly worked here. And it was something that we were all very concerned about, because we knew how late it was. And if we were to, fall down and have all these problems, I'm sure the president would have pointed to Massachusetts and say, hey, look how vote by mail does not work. And we clearly proved to him and the rest of the nation that it does work.
Senator Feingold, hi. This is David Olson, the city clerk in the city of
Sure.
Newton. How are you?
David, well, listen, first of all, before you talk, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you, all the city clerks, all the town clerks, for the Herculean job that you've been doing. It is not an easy process that we are asking you to do. So before you speak, I just want to say thank you for all the efforts you're putting forth.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Barry. It's great working with you. David, I want to, before you start, if people have questions, I just want to make sure they know that they can put them in the chat. And then I'm going to call on people from the chat, and I'm going to call on people to speak. David obviously was the next speaker. And then we have the clerk from Brookline as well. So David, go ahead, take it away. And maybe there won't be any questions, because after you speak and Barry speaks, there won't be anything to ask. But again, thank you, Barry, for driving this distance to be with us. So
Absolutely. Anytime.
okay.
Thank you, Senator Creem and Senator Feingold. I do think this was probably the best solution with the situation that we're in right now. Definitely, you needed to have an application in September for all of those unenrolled voters, so we knew which ballot to send them. And at that time, most everybody also signed up to get a ballot in November. For Newton, we have 61,000 registered voters, and as of today, we've got 33,000 mail-in applications for ballots for November. So we are well over 50% of our voters have asked for a mail-in ballot, and they still have a few weeks to continue to ask. So we are expecting that number to go up. Senator Feingold, you did say that this is something that is just for this year. And I would encourage you to start to think about next year right now. We here in Newton, I do expect that we will have a local municipal election come January or February, and people will still be concerned about COVID-19 at that point, and we don't have anything in place to do a vote by mail option for our local election. So you got it done in 60 days for the state. You're kind of running out of time to think about it for next year, for both any city or town that might have a special election this winter, but also all of the towns that have their spring elections. It's probably going to be a big piece and a big concern for them in terms of being able to do a vote by mail option for their town elections. So I would encourage you to begin to think about and start to plan for allowing municipalities in 2021 to continue on with mail-in voting. At least in Newton, it's proven to be very popular, and I expect that people are going to expect that it will be in place for our future elections.
So David, I'm going to ask the same thing to Linda Goldberg. So did you see any glitches in the primary time or anything that you're experiencing now that you may want to share? Or if there weren't any, I'm just as happy. But I know some of us who heard it was difficult. It was so difficult for the clerks in your office, and thank you. Any information on that, whether there's anything we should know about?
Sure, it was a big shift. I mean, usually for a primary, we might send out maybe 1,000 absentee ballots in a normal year. We then jumped to 27,000 in September, and as I said, we've got 33,000 going out for November. For weeks, our office becomes a mail house as opposed to a city clerk's office. We are fortunate in Newton that I've got a print shop that does mailings for us, so I can look to the purchasing department to get the postage onto the envelopes and get them out. But we have had to hire poll workers to come in to help us get all of those envelopes labeled so that they got to the right place, that they got the right ballot in the envelope. Even though it's this pretty much the same ballot for everybody. We do have 3 representative districts in Newton, so you've got to make sure that you've got the right representative district ballot in the envelope. It's a lot easier than back in September where there were 4 party ballots for each of those 3. So we had 12 ballots that we had to make sure we got the right ballot into an envelope. It does cost quite a bit more to do an election this way, but for health reasons and for safety reasons, it is definitely something that we are seeing that our voters are preferring, and it is very popular.
Thank you. Linda Goldberg, the clerk from Brookline, and I know that Jeff Cutting is here as well, and he's been working with Linda. So Linda, if you want to speak, and then Jeff, however you want to do it.
Well, I'm in agreement with what David has said. I think that vote by mail is the way to go. It took a little while for us to get up to snuff when we were starting out for the September election because it was all new. So after, we were very careful to try to do it the right way. And, but generally speaking, I think most people found that it took some time to figure out how to best do this in the most economical and safe way to do it. We are fortunate that we had a great deal of support from our town, from our select board, from all of our administrators. As far as the expense, it was expensive, both for the cost of a lot of the items and just the number of people that we had to bring in to help us get the ballots out on a timely fashion. I think Jeff has really good numbers that I'd like him to give us.
Great. Did you want to add something, Jeff?
I want to make, first of all, thank you for this legislation. It was critical. Yourself and Senator Feingold should be commended for it. And I hope that you'll take David's suggestion of maybe a 6-month extension and at least until June 30th of 2021 for all those local elections that will take place. And I'd like to suggest that maybe you take up in the next session the idea of making mail-in voting permanent. I think it's critical in this day and age. I would also like to suggest that, beyond making it permanent, you look at the idea of not having separate processes for absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, but just take the best of both and have mail-in voting. It's confusing for the voters, which ballot, should I get an absentee, should I get a mail-in? It's more work for the clerk's office. I think if we're going to move to mail-in voting, you should work with the Secretary of State and have one process for everybody. The idea that you needed a reason not to come to the polls anymore should be forgotten, and it should be a right to mail in your ballot. I would also suggest that you work with the Secretary of State, and by the way, his office is unbelievably supportive. They should be commented at any they call us on a regular basis and we deal with them. They are just top-notch professionals. But The other thing we saw is there's several different applications out there. And so some folks got the card, some folks downloaded it off the web, some folks got it, wrote notes. If there's a way to have, just one or two applications, it makes our life easier, and it's easier to explain to the voter when they call up. So that would be good. Might suggest you back up the last day to get a mail-in ballot by maybe 10 days instead of 7. The idea that you can ask on the 28th of October and have us mail you a ballot and have it come back on time is literally impossible. So I think if you're going to look at some of the things that can make this better is tweaking the timelines, having just mail-in ballot generally, have maybe one applications instead of 4 different ways to apply. And then the card that got sent out, we had to mail back at least 20% of them. People couldn't figure out, especially in a primary, they're Democrat and they want to vote in Republican, or the Republican, they want to vote in a Democrat, or the unenrolled didn't fill out anything. Some people didn't sign it. That was the biggest glitch in the whole thing, was trying to educate people, as Senator Feingold said, about how to fill out a postcard. And part of it was confusing because it said September election, November election, or all elections. And some people checked 1, 3. So I think it was a huge, great start. And I think if you take the feedback from folks, you can make the system even better in the future and just have it for every election. It really works. And I think the way the world's changed, people love it. We processed in the first 4 days, 16,000 ballots. We have another probably 6 or 8 to go out we have 38,000 registered voters, so we'll probably be over 50% as well, just as Newton is. And our drop box at City Hall, Town Hall, is just slammed. That's a great option as well for folks to use. So thank you for all you've done. It's really helped the citizens.
Thank you. And I do think that we certainly do need additional education, particularly if we didn't have the minority districts at the same level of vote as we had, in other
Right.
districts. So I did want to introduce my colleague, Representative Vitolo. He's here. And as you know, while Representative Lawn had another commitment, nothing happens unless it happens in the Senate and in the House, and the governor signs it. So when we pat ourselves on the back and say we did such a great job, I look at Barry because he's the chair, but there had to be a good chair on the House side, and had to work together. So that's the important thing. When we see on the federal level there isn't a lot of working together, it really makes us feel good that we're in the state. So Representative Vitolo, do you have anything you want to add to that, or would you like to speak about how you saw it? Thanks for joining us.
Quickly, I want to thank Jeff Nutting and Linda Goldberg. I got my ballot in the mail yesterday. I haven't opened it here, and I'm going to fill it out. And personally, I'm going to walk mine back to Town Hall and slide it in the drop box. I'll probably do it tomorrow morning when I'm dropping my daughter off at kindergarten. Looking forward to voting for lots of folks on this, including Senator Creem. And it's just dumb luck that the office is adjacent to the House group pod for election laws are really crummy offices, which is how I ended up with one as a first-term rep. So my office is next door to Chair Lawn's, and so we would see each other and talk on a pretty regular basis about this issue over the past over the past year, over the past months. And I tell you that he was constantly polling, informally and more formally, folks in the House to figure out what we could get done and to push for as far as folks were willing to go in terms of making sure people can get their vote in as many different ways as possible. Really, and Chair Long worked really hard on that. And I know Chair Feingold did as well. And I think the proof is in the pudding. Turnout for the primary was fabulous. I know we're going to have great turnout in the general, and people's votes are going to get counted. And that's contrary to what Senator Lee suggested in Utah about a day ago. That actually is what it's all about. The democracy is here. And so thank you to everyone involved who's helped make it a reality this.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to go into the chat and see about the questions in the chat. So the first, I'm going to bring mine all the way up. So I have the first. First from Martina about putting your name in communities in the chat. That's great. Then, of course, Michael had to tell us we weren't muted. Then from Jeff, who had several suggestions. Then, Michael, you had a question about drop boxes. Do you want to ask that question? Were Dropbox part of the bill, and could they be expanded?
I saw something in the bill about drop boxes, Barry, but is there any possibility there's enough leeway to expand that? I live in a senior community, and most of these folks won't go to the polls. They're doing a drive for mail-in, but is there any way or any funds to expand the drop boxes for the upcoming election?
Well, the relevant word that you used is money. If you read the Globe and we're $5 billion in the hole, I don't think, I never say never, but I don't think for this coming election, but I think it is true. I think that this was far more successful than we thought. And while it might not be anything that we can do, we certainly can talk to the various towns and to the Secretary of State, but money is not on the table right now, additional money. But I defer to Chairman Feingold, and maybe
No, I concur. It's just, we have 5 billion problems right now, unfortunately. Yeah. It's a moving target, and we were hopeful that the president and Congress were going to come with some type of second HEROES Act or CARES Act or come through, and it just not happened. So we're going to have to make some very tough decisions. And unlike the federal government, we cannot borrow money like the way the feds can, and we can't print money. So, we have a balanced budget amendment, so we have to balance our books. I mean, we can do some temporary borrowing, but we can't do anything what the feds can do. So it's going to be incredibly challenging for us.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Martina Jackson, who, if she could, she'd be running from house to house picking up votes from her job in the state committee or on all campaigns. I don't know what we would do without you, Martina. So I know you have a question. If you want to ask it about voting Dropbox, go for it.
First of all, thank you so much, both Senator Creem and Senator Feingold, for giving us this opportunity. It's really, I've heard a ton of questions, and one of the things that people are concerned about is the safety of voting by mail or by Dropbox. I hear more and more people saying that they are going to avail themselves of early voting because they're afraid to vote in their on election day, but people are really concerned. And I wonder if you have some thoughts. I voted, my husband and I put our ballots in the Dropbox at City Hall. There are 2 of them in Newton, and it was very effective. But since then, there's been a lot of propaganda about what people are going to do about paper ballots. So I just wonder if you could speak to that.
I know that I'm going to let my colleague talk, but I will say that I think the answer to that depends on where you live. I'm not worried about these things happening in my district and probably not in Massachusetts. But in this heightened climate of anxiety that we are existing these days, I can't be sure that they'll be missing lock boxes or whatever, and it is frightening. I'm going to probably be in New Hampshire, whether it's working remotely or they're looking for people that want to stand at the polls outside. And I think they're looking for people to just make sure that things go as they're supposed to go. Ambassador White is on the call. I know he has a question I'll be able to talk about. He's been leading the charge on voter protection. So I
Yeah,
just think
I would
we
just-
are different here in Massachusetts. Go ahead, Bill.
I would just add that, and I concur with Senator Cream, and, I think that having people like Linda, Dave, and Jeff as our city and town clerks, I think they have the utmost integrity. So I'm not worried at all with our cities and town clerks. As far as people picking up, stealing, I'm not worried that here in Massachusetts about taking, ballot box and taking them. And as far as the integrity of the actual elections, one of the things that, Representative Vitolo and Senator Cream and I worked on is that you do have to sign the envelope, and you're authorizing that this is you. And there are criminal penalties if you fraudulently sign this. And I don't believe that anybody would ever risk getting a criminal penalty for a vote. So this nonsense of fraud I just don't believe it. So I think there's an incredible amount of integrity. I think it's a great question that Martina asked, but as what Senator Cream said, I have the utmost respect for our system here in Massachusetts, and I think we're fine. If I could take a point of personal privilege of what Senator Cream said is, I'm on the New Hampshire border, so my district abuts New Hampshire. For those who support Biden, I'm very, very concerned about what's going to happen in New Hampshire. So any of you that want to do anything, please come up to New Hampshire. We need the help.
Well, we're going to hear.
I apologize if I went out of bounds there, but
No. We're going to hear from Ambassador White as we go along, and he's got some good tips on that. So Helen Thayer asked for a link to the bill. Kat Anderson from my office has put that link in. So unless there's another question, I think I'll go on to Rhonda Jacobson, who wants to know what's to be done to allow voting by mail going forward. I think we've heard some commitment, but I don't know, Rhonda, if you think you want to elaborate on that a little bit. You might be muted.
Thanks. I just want to see this continue. I think that anything we could do in this democracy to encourage voting and make it easy for people to vote is an important thing. Other countries have a national day off, holiday, to facilitate voting. I think that things are never going to go back to the way they are. And I think that our senior population is growing. So the more we can do to make this easy, the better it should be. And the infrastructure will be created because we've already done it once, or in some communities twice. I also would like to say, I would not like to see absentee ballots eliminated. There are people who live out of the country for periods of time, and they can vote by email or online in some way. I don't know exactly how, but if you eliminate the absentee ballot, that will not be an option for them. Thank you. And I do want to thank everyone who worked so hard to create this. You have saved those of us who are avoiding the great indoors.
Thank you. And a reader, Colafella, thank you. It's so nice to thank the poll workers, and great job. Rita, did you have something else to add? You might be muted. I can see if she's muted or, well, we'll come back to Rita. If you become unmuted or you have anything to add, please let us know, okay? Brian Barish, who's working hard as ever in Newton to bring the votes in, and Brian, you wanted to thank everybody. Did you have anything else you want to add? Brian? Brian might have left because he's not someone that I thought would be muted here. He's not usually muted. So, okay, so we'll move on. Kat Anderson has put the link in the chat. You can see that. And Ambassador White, I know you perhaps would like to just talk about, if nothing else, you can tell us when you're going to get rid of the beard.
Well, first, can you hear me? Let me congratulate you on the work that you've done. And it's a little bit sad to say, but this may be one of the benefits of COVID-19, that we're really going to change some of these voting laws and make it easier for people to vote. And we've been involved. Well, let me tell you about the beard. We all know about the playoff hockey players and whatever wear a beard through their playoffs. This is my election beard. It's coming off on November 4th, or I'm moving to Norway. And I think it'll be a positive. I think we'll get rid of the beard at that point. There's a lot of issues that are going on around the country on the voting laws. And I know, Barry, if you're going to look to extend it or whatever, this is a great learning time. We will learn a lot more after this election. So I wouldn't be rushing at the moment to be changing too much in the law that you've now been able to get through. I mean, you got the problem, David has mentioned what you do in January and February, and maybe you can extend that for a period. But this is a great learning period. I've been involved in a number of voter protection issues and doing a lot of stuff in New Hampshire. And we're learning every day when people call in with questions about how to vote. And I'm sure you're doing that in Massachusetts. So I think we can learn an awful lot from this election period around the country. And I think that would help you in drafting your legislation to continue this. But certainly I think we all hope that we can continue this, making it easy for everyone to vote and being able and in a position to answer questions. And just for a little bit of comfort, we did a Zoom call 2 weeks ago when they were looking for voter protection lawyers to assist in some of the battleground states. We had 470 lawyers from Massachusetts on the phone call, ready to volunteer to help around the country on voter protection matters. So there's a great team out there, and I want to congratulate you. And in fact, I have to get off this call now to go to another voter protection session.
So I was one of those lawyers, and Barry, if you wanted to join the voter protection, we could use you. So Barry Feingold, but thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for all you do. Okay. Sharon, did you, Helen, did you have something else you wanted to ask? Maybe not. Sharon. Sharon Sasson, do you have a question that you want to ask? What should we do with mail-in ballot if we would prefer to vote in person? I mean, you can always vote in person. I don't know if you're muted, but some people really always want to vote in person, and you certainly can do that. So Rhonda Jacobson had another question about absentee ballots allow those living out of the country to vote. And so I don't think we want to end that, but that's a good point. It's important to do that.
Senator,
yes.
excuse me. Absentee ballot does not have anything to do with overseas voting. That's a completely separate process called UVCAVA. Absentee ballot has been in place, or voting has been in place forever, and it required a reason that you weren't going to go to the polls, including medical, religious, etc. My point was you shouldn't have to have a reason to go to mail, to vote by mail. And you should just have the right to do that. So I'm not suggesting in any way we eliminate the ability to vote from overseas or any place in the world. I'm suggesting that we don't need two internal processes here in the Commonwealth, that just an application to vote by mail is all you should need, and not a reason of religion or health or anything. So just wanted to clarify that.
So I want to go back. Thank you very much. So I want to go back to Sharon's question about what you do with the mail-in ballot if you prefer to vote in person. I may have not been clear.
Throw it away.
You can always vote. Throw it away. You can always vote in person, and you could have requested it and then felt like more comfortable about voting in person. So I agree. Throw it away and go to the polls. That's the answer. So Deborah Beck, are there enough
Yeah.
drop boxes? Yeah, go ahead.
Right. First of all, I want to thank you for this meeting and thank you for the legislation. And I guess once all the concerns were raised about the postal system, the idea of drop boxes just seemed so appealing. And I'm just wondering, are there enough? And in the future, can there be more?
Well, I don't know the clerks. Jeff wants to answer that question on Brookline.
So
Jeff,
there's no restriction on how many boxes you can have. The issue is twofold. Security. Ours, for instance, is right next to the front door of Town Hall and under a camera 24/7. So I think communities would have to think long and hard about having them willy-nilly, even though, this is Massachusetts, but we want to make sure we monitor it. Second of all, we checked that lockbox starting this week. We mailed on Monday. We had ballots back yesterday. We will check that mailbox every hour. And then on election day, every half hour.
Great.
So if we have boxes all over town, that becomes incredibly difficult to go drive around town all day long and collect from those boxes. So from a clerk's perspective, we love the fact that it's controlled, it's close, it's under video surveillance, and we can go and get it and process those ballots on a timely fashion. So I think long and hard discussions, maybe there's some ways to, solve the problem. I suggested to our library that we share a Dropbox with the library, and they don't use it for 3 weeks, but they weren't thrilled with that. Those boxes cost $1,000 to $4,000.
Yeah, for the same thing in Newton as well. We considered getting additional drop boxes to go around the city, but as Jeff said, we were concerned as well with security. We wouldn't have anybody watching those boxes that were not near City Hall, and we would have to have staff go out to empty them. And then the cost of them, and we weren't sure just how, where this was going into the future. So for buying drop boxes for just 2 elections, it didn't make sense. But if this becomes the norm, we definitely we'll continue to consider it as long as we can find secure places for those boxes to be and can get to them so that we can get the ballots out of them.
Well, that's very helpful. And it's great to know how frequently they are emptied so that they're not getting overflowing, or that information is very helpful. Thank you.
And here in Newton as well, we've also put a drop box inside City Hall right outside my office, so that if there is somebody who is concerned or uncomfortable about leaving it in the drop box outside, they can come in. They don't have to come into the office. They can just come into City Hall and drop their ballot in our drop box outside the office, but in the building. So we're trying to make this as easy and useful as we can.
So we had another question, David. Again, this is an interpretation of if you mail in your ballot and try to vote in person, because this, I don't think we want to know what happens if the town has started processing. You may not be able to get your vote back. So that the question I thought was, can you decide to throw it away and not use it? But the question then still comes, what happens if you used it and then decide that you want to vote in person?
Right. So if you have mailed it back and we have received it, you will not be able to cast a second ballot. If you go to the polls, when you give your name will already be checked off as having submitted a ballot, and so you won't be able to vote again at the polls. And so, if you have any concern or question about your vote, and you're wondering if you should wait, I would say wait a little bit, but don't wait too long if you're going to be mailing your ballot back, because once you do put it in the mail, once we received it, your ballot is considered cast. And you will not be able to get another ballot to go in person on the in-person early voting or in person on election day to vote because your ballot has already been cast.
Okay, thank you. I did have something from Marcy Johnson, who is the head of the Newton League of Women Voters. She had to go to another meeting, but she's very anxious to help in any way to make sure that people vote and they have accessibility. So Elaine Bacall, you had a question about languages on the ballots. Did you want to ask that?
Yeah, I was just curious if some people would have trouble understanding the instructions if their English isn't that good. I'm wondering what you do about that. Are there any other languages available for the instructions?
Barry, you might know that answer.
Yeah, I mean, so there is stuff in Spanish, but it just, even that is still challenging. But initially nothing comes out. You know, it's hard. So we've done some stuff in Lawrence with that, but it's just still hard to figure out who needs a Spanish ballot, who needs a Vietnamese ballot, who needs a French ballot, who needs a Portuguese ballot. So that's what gets very, very challenging. So it's clearly an area that we need to work on because we just, like I said, we did not have enough participation for our lower socioeconomic areas. So, I mean, but once again, if we know someone wants a Spanish ballot, for example, we can definitely send them one. But the problem is just sometimes the application is not always in the language people need.
That might be something to think about as we go forward.
I have another question before I go, if that's okay.
You can have two. That's good.
When do you actually start counting the votes on these mail-in ballots?
Oh, okay. So David.
Sure.
Oh, and then Jeff. Yeah.
It really depends on the community, but the legislation has allowed for us to do what's called advanced tabulation, as well as central tabulation and then tabulation on election night. In Newton, we are going to take advantage of advanced tabulation, and all of these mail-in ballots that come in by Friday, the 30th of October, we will start to run those through our tabulators on Saturday. We'll be doing it on Saturday and Sunday so that we can get those ballots processed, but we won't be getting a total from those ballots. So we won't know what the count is. We won't be ending those tabulators until the close of polls on election night. So although we've run the ballots through and the tabulators have tabulated, we won't know the results until the polls close on election night. So we'll be doing all of the ballots that have been sent in, that have come in from mail-in early voting. We were doing those on the 31st and 1st. And then anything that comes in on that 31st and 1st and 2nd and 3rd, those will be counted at the polling locations. We will be sending those ballots right out to the polls to be counted on election day. And then as Senator Feingold mentioned, if your ballot is postmarked by election day, we can still receive it up until the Friday after the election. And we will be counting those ballots, everything that comes in from after election day, on the Monday after the election. So it depends on when we get your ballot, when it will be tabulated, but results will not be gotten from any of our machines until the polls have closed on election night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, did you have anything to add? I want to keep in mind that Senator Feingold has a hard drop off at 7:30. So
just to follow up on David's, we're doing a little different in Brooklyn. We're going to do advanced removal only, which means we separate the ballot from the envelope. We'll be doing that on the same time schedule that David described after the 30th. And then we will bring all those ballots to each precinct on election day, and they'll be fed into the machine by precinct. Anything that comes later will be counted on election day. We consider tabulation, but we have real concern about the age of our voting equipment, and we don't have any to spare, so we're going to be a little cautious. But it's a good law. We really appreciate the idea that it would be impossible to open 20,000 envelopes on election day. So it was a really well thought out bill. Thank you.
thank you. I'm going to skip down to Carol Fulton because I think the other ones on the chat have been answered. But Carol, did you want to ask the 2 internal process ballots? Are you muted, Carol?
Carolyn?
Hi.
Okay.
Yeah, well, my question is what's on the screen there. Can you take the ballot that you got, bring it to the library and vote in person, and then they would destroy it, right? I mean, don't you have to account
As
for,
long as you don't mail it, then it's fine.
really? You don't have to let them destroy it or something? Or do you fill that out and do they feed it through the machine, or are you actually voting with a second ballot at the polling place?
So if I could answer that,
ahead.
here in Newton anyway, if you do bring your ballot to in-person early voting, we will be taking that from you and spoiling it and giving you a fresh ballot to vote in person.
Okay.
If you show up on election day, the same thing. If you brought your ballots that you were mailed and you want to cast it, again, we will not be accepting that at the polling location, but we will spoil that ballot for you and then you can vote in person.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're just about at that 7:30 and we seem to have finished all the questions in the chat. If somebody has one more question, we can do it. Otherwise, I think we want to thank Senator Feingold very much for joining us. Unless I hear somebody has one more question. I think that concludes. I want to thank everybody that was on. I want to thank and say we're grateful to our clerks for the great jobs that they do. David Olson, Linda Goldberg, Jeff Nutting. We don't know what we would do without your willingness to work hard and make sure that everybody's vote gets back counted and be aware that voter suppression isn't going to happen in Massachusetts. So thank you and have a good evening. And again, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.